Bears are among the most dangerous animals on the planet. No wonder, because the giants have a powerful body, large and strong paws, sharp claws. All animals of this species are underestimated by many people, since the latter consider them clumsy and slow. In fact, the bear is able to run fast, swim well, perfectly climb trees, and if necessary, mercilessly deal with his victim. You are on Wild Assault Channel, and in this video you will see 4 ruthless bear attacks. Enjoy the video. Welcome to Wild Assault. Frances Cannon was born in 1947 in a place called Minto in the state of Alaska, USA. She spent most of her life in this state, exploring its wildlife, and encountered many of the dangers of the animal world, as her father was a hunter and often took her with him on outings. But Frances did not share her father's passion and often quarreled with him, as she thought it was crazy to kill animals for pleasure or sport. Minto had an abundance of wildlife, and black bears were not an exception, and they were not uncommon in this wonderful area. But Frances told me that at a very young age she had an encounter with one of these majestic animals, face to face, which was almost a tragedy for the young girl at the time. However, thanks to her courage and calmness, she was able to avoid the attack and even established a kind of contact with the black bear, which helped them both to avoid conflict. This episode was an important turning point in Frances's life, and afterwards she became fascinated with wildlife and wildlife studies. And not surprisingly, she has found many acquaintances who share her views on the nature and the wildlife around them in this truly beautiful and amazing place. One of these acquaintances was Johnson, one of Frances's longtime friends, and Fletcher, a retired military officer who became Frances's loyal companions and shared her views on the nature around them. Together, they spent a great deal of time studying and observing wildlife, striving to preserve this beauty for future generations. Together, they formed their own research group dedicated to the study and protection of Alaska's wildlife. They have been on many different trips with many different, sometimes even frightening situations, one of which was a sudden attack by a black bear in 1960 on a lake north of Minto. It all started when Frances and 2 friends decided to visit this place for a vacation. They packed everything they needed for their trip and set off in a friend's private plane. The flight was successful, and they made it to their destination without incident. They set up camp near the lake and decided to spend the night outdoors fishing, and at first everything was quite calm and nothing foreshadowed trouble. But they did not know that this harmless picnic could well be their last. After a fairly successful fishing trip, they prepared dinner and were getting ready to eat, when suddenly they were startled by a crunch and rustling in the bushes nearby. The cause of the crunch was a black bear that crept up to them. Apparently, the animal was attracted by the smell of freshly cooked food. The bear came out of the bushes and started approaching the camp. The guys were frightened but did not panic, as they had already had experience of contact with this powerful beast. They knew that an encounter with a bear can be dangerous, but the main thing is to keep calm. But the bear was sick or too hungry to retreat and thought that Frances Cannon would be an easy prey for him. Black bears are one of the most dangerous creatures in the wild. They have sharp claws and teeth, powerful muscles, and good speed, making them dangerous opponents for humans. Black bears usually avoid contact with humans, but if they feel threatened or if there is food in their territory, they may attack. The force of a black bear's paw strike is great enough to break the spine of even an adult moose, let alone a fragile girl. The bear lunged at Frances and threw her to the ground. The girl screamed in horror, but quickly recovered and began to fight the bear, desperately trying to frighten the beast in any way. But this only made the animal angrier. The bear started to scramble and growl. With its sharp claws, it tore Frances's clothes and gave her several deep scratches. But one of her friends, Johnson, came to her aid in time and took a stick and hit the animal in the eye with it, trying to keep the girl away from the animal, and he succeeded. The bear howled in pain, threw the woman, and switched to Johnson, giving him several blows with his paws, after which Johnson fell to the ground unconscious. But this only inflamed the animal, and he continued to abuse the helpless body of the man. But help arrived in time. During all this, A third of the friends of Fletcher was able to get to a nearby airplane with a .22 caliber pistol and fired several shots at the attacking bear, but the weapon was weak and the bear only retreated, which gave the friends some time to escape. Francis and Fletcher got Johnson into the plane and hurried back to their home. Upon arrival, the friends took their injured comrade to the hospital, where he received the necessary care. All three survivors felt exhausted and frightened, but thanks to the courage and determination of each of them, they managed to escape the bear attack. After they recounted everything that had happened, a group of people were assembled to organize a search expedition in search of a bear that posed a danger to the other residents, and tourists. The group was ready to go on a mission to find and eliminate the threat. Shortly after the search operation began, the bear was discovered near a campground set up by a group of friends, exhausted and covered in gunshot wounds. The bear attacked the group before it managed to get away. One of the expedition members was seriously injured and was rushed to the hospital. The rest of the participants continued to chase the bear to prevent another attack on the humans. After hours of searching and shooting in the direction of the bear, it was caught up and struck near one of the locals' houses and stopped dead in its tracks. The expedition ended successfully, and the bear was no longer a threat to the surrounding area. The friends were relieved that the danger had been eliminated and they could not worry about the lives of the locals, as the wounded bear would no longer be able to hunt animals and would follow the easier prey, humans. After this incident, they decided to be more careful while traveling and not to violate safety rules in nature. They also decided to hold educational events and spread information on how to behave in case of encounters with wild animals. The friends were grateful for the support and help they received from their comrades, as well as for the professionalism and promptness of the conservationists. They realized that solidarity and mutual support play an important role in solving urgent problems and situations. Frances has continued her work in wildlife and natural resource protection, remaining one of the leading figures in the environmental movement in Alaska. Her example inspires many people to fight for the preservation of our planet and its unique natural beauty. Frances is an example of how the power of people can move the world for the better. Her preaching about the importance of environmental stewardship, even in the face of the horror of what happened to her and her companions, has galvanized many to take action and inspire change. Her determination and belief that everyone has the power to make an impact make her a true hero among nature lovers and environmentalists. Her father, Francis, also changed his views and began to help his daughter with her wildlife research. He started to organize excursions to the forests for tourists, as he knew the area he had lived in for many years. Frances was happy that her father supported her hobby, and they spent a lot of time together studying nature and enjoying each other's company. Together, they discovered many interesting facts about the animal world and became very close. The story began with the determination of two Norwegian travelers, Sebastian Nielsen and Ludvig Fjeld, who were the first in the world to decide to circumnavigate the world by kayak around the Svalbard archipelago, also known as Svalbard. The archipelago, consisting of 3 large and 7 tiny islands, is located in the icy ocean and is the northernmost point of Norway. The distance of the route is about 2,000 kilometers. The reason why no one dared to make such an audacious voyage before was the impressive natural conditions of Spitsbergen. In winter, the local territories are raging with strong ice storms, and in summer the thawing of the Ostfona Glacier takes place with great force, which leads to the breaking off of huge icebergs that, without the luxurious comfort of the Titanic, can easily undergo a modest dive in a kayak. The friends decided that despite the dangers of the trek, summer was the best time for the expedition. They planned to spend 2 or 3 months on the water, savoring the beauty of the fjords, watching out for unexpected icebergs, and enjoying untouched nature during its summer fun. However, the chosen summer itinerary had a not insignificant drawback. Due to the seasonal migration at this time of year, not only many bird species arrive on Svalbard Island, but also the largest predators on Earth, polar bears. They are capable of exceptional speed to catch up with their prey, and their paws with razor-sharp claws can quickly end a human's life. Although polar bears seem to attack humans much less frequently, this is only because their habitat and that of humans hardly ever overlap. Svalbard is an exception to this rule. The archipelago is home to about 2,500 members of the human species, and in season, about 3,000 predators of the Ursus maritimus species, ready to happily consume any other inhabitants. However, despite this, the two species coexist peacefully, with only 5 fatal polar bear attacks on humans in the last 40 years. However, bear hunting is strictly prohibited, and any firearms, even those used for self-defense, are subject to police investigation. The friends recognized the danger posed by polar bears. It took several months to plan an itinerary and buy everything they might need, including guns. On June 5, 2010, Sebastian Nilsson and Ludwig Fjeld pushed off with their oars. The voyage began perfectly fine, just as one could imagine. Clear skies overhead, calm, clear oceans, majestic fjords, and long shadows from the polar sun frozen above the horizon. Two great polar explorers, with strong strokes of their oars, were setting their faithful vessels on a voyage along uncharted shores. All was wonderful and continued for 3 weeks until the friends had traveled more than a quarter of the route. On June 22nd, they reached the northeastern land, the second largest island in the archipelago, where the famous Ostfonna Glacier was located. The next morning, when Sebastian and Ludwig climbed out of their tent, they noticed that the majestic calm had been shattered by a strong wind from the ocean. Clouds were rushing across the sky. This was typical of Svalbard when cold air masses from the North Pole collide with a warm south wind. This means the approach of a very strong, dangerous storm for navigators. Of course, launching was now out of the question. Sebastian quickly put up an awning against the wind and struggled to prepare breakfast. The friends decided to sit on the shore and wait for the weather to improve. Cozily wrapped up in sleeping bags, they began to drink hot tea. At that time, the icy sea wind, which seems not so terrible when you sit inside an airtight tent, actually carried a deadly danger. It carried the odor of the human camp for miles around. And not far away, there was a creature who was eagerly sniffing that wind. Toward evening, Ludwig stepped behind the nearest hill to go to the bathroom and noticed some strange movement at the edge of the visible space. It was a most inopportune moment. However, no matter how much the Norwegian looked at the horizon, he saw nothing else suspicious. Nevertheless, Ludwig told Sebastian that he had dreamed something. The travelers did not want to sleep. They thought of moving the camp, but the wind was too strong and they would have been blown away in the process. And something or someone could trace all their movements if they were on land and not on water. Ludwig checked the signal stretches, put the rifle next to the tent. The friends sat with their backs to each other, gazing into the rocky hillsides that seemed ghostly in the polar light. In this way, they spent 5 hours. Afterward, the travelers checked the stretches, climbed into the tent, zipped themselves shut from the polar reality, and fell into an almost serene sleep. Awakening came to them with terrifying force, not from the searing cold, not from the tearing explosion, but from the crunching sound of the tearing nylon tent. Sebastian and Ludwig found themselves defenseless before the bear's huge open mouth. The next instant, lightning-fast paw strikes swept away the entire front of the tent. Sebastian roared, screaming with all his might, and then the bear grabbed him by the neck, pulling him out of the sleeping bag, and then sank its teeth into my head in a terrifying thrust. The pain was shocking and pierced every cell in Sebastian's body. Suddenly, the bear let go of him, backing away briefly as if to notice his breathing. The shock and adrenaline rushing into his bloodstream drove Sebastian to do something unbelievable for the human condition. He fumbled for his rifle next to his sleeping bag and barely managed to aim at the bear. The bear broke the rifle like a straw. Sebastian felt a feverish panic, ran his hand along the barrel and realized that the weapon had broken into 2 pieces. Sebastian and Ludwig froze before the colossal maw, trembling with uncontrollable fear. Ludwig struggled to get out of his sleeping bag and crept toward the tent, looking for his gun. At this time, the predator sank its teeth into its prey by the head. In horror, Ludwig saw the broken gun slip out of his friend's hands and the bear drag Sebastian along the shore. He was still alive and his screams made his blood run cold. Suddenly, the bear let go of Sebastian, put him on the ground, and stood on his chest with his paws. He was incredibly heavy, but Sebastian hardly felt it because of the pain in his neck. In an instant, their gazes crossed. There was nothing human in the bear's eyes. Sebastian raised his hands, trying to hold his head, but holding this huge carcass with his hands was like trying to stop a train at full throttle. The bear was positioned to break the man's neck, but a sudden suspicious noise distracted his attention. Ludwig, holding his rifle, stood 20 paces from the scrum and took aim at his assailant. The bear seemed to realize the danger and rose on its hind legs, holding Sebastian's head in its jaws. The sharp sound of the shot rang out in the cold, windless silence, followed immediately by the growl of a wounded animal. The bear let Sebastian out of its jaws, giving Ludwig a chance to shoot again and again. The predator tore to the side and settled to the ground. Ludwig ran closer and put the full load of his gun into the animal. Sebastian, still conscious, lay staring up at the sky. Ludwig realized that all responsibility for his friend's life was now his alone. He activated the satellite phone and called the hospital in the capital of Spitsbergen-Longyear. There was a helicopter there and they were flown in to help. Suddenly a chilling thought came into Ludwig's mind. The entire shore was stained with half-frozen human blood. It was likely that the man-eating bears also had friends and were now sniffing the air with pleasure. Ludwig suddenly jumped up and stared tensely into the distance, peering at the horizon. These 2.5 hours had been the most terrifying of his life. Meanwhile, Dr. Axel Belize, who had taken the phone call, was doing everything possible and impossible to make sure help arrived as quickly as possible. Finally, the helicopter landed. The movers who arrived lifted the injured man and carried him to Longyear. He was still conscious, which was a very good sign. Before the blades had even stopped, the patient was already lying on the operating table. For 3 hours, the surgeons had been sewing lacerations on his neck and shoulder. The surgeons feared that, because of the penetrating wounds of the muscle in his shoulder, Sebastian would no longer be able to row. He spent 3 months in the hospital, and after a year of intense training, he was back in a kayak. Sebastian is now one of the few people on the planet who can proudly say that he got his scars in a fight with a polar bear. Walt Earl was born in Idaho, USA, one of the most beautiful states in America. With beautiful natural landscapes and reserves, the guy grew up surrounded by mountains, forests, and lakes. Already from childhood, he was fascinated by nature and animals. He spent a lot of time fishing, hunting, and just walking through the forests and mountains. While walking through one of the forests of Idaho, he got into a difficult situation that could have cost the life of a young boy. Everything started as usual. It seemed to be an ordinary walk with the purpose to study closer the local flora and fauna of the nature of this incredible place. At that moment, Walt was passing by the lake, hoping to come across a black bear fishing. Walt had his equipment, a camera, and a supply of food with him, as the hike was planned for a long time. Earl wanted to capture a lot of good pictures, as it brought him some income. However, while photographing one of the wildlife, Earl lost his guard and didn't notice a huge bear coming at him from behind the bushes, who was very unhappy to see a man in his territory. Black bears are majestic and very dangerous animals, which in the wilderness people are better not to encounter, as they can attack if they feel threatened. However, encountering a black bear in their natural habitat can be an unforgettable and exciting experience. It is important to remember to follow safe behavior when encountering wild animals and not to get too close to them. Keeping your distance and respecting their space is the key to a safe and harmonious coexistence with black bears. Earl was in a different situation. He had no weapons, but he stood up tall, raised his arms above his head to make himself look bigger, and started yelling loudly, which confused the bear, and he decided to retreat. Thus, Earl bought himself some time to get away from the place before the bear came at him again. Earl has participated in many hunting competitions and tournaments, winning many prizes and awards. He was known as a skilled hunter who always took the biggest game and distinguished himself from the rest in his skills, which led him to enroll in a prestigious institution specializing in the capture of endangered species, or killing wild animals that pose a threat to the civilian population of Idaho. As the years went by, Earl was promoted to his position because of his outstanding skills, and he even had his own subordinates who followed Earl's example and learned a great deal from him during their time together. They became a great team, able to solve the most difficult problems. One of the key moments that motivated Earl to enroll in a prestigious institution and become a state fur trapper was his desire to save and prevent the extinction of rare species of animals that were in danger of extinction. Earl has always been a passionate advocate for nature and the environment, and he saw his mission as maintaining balance in the ecosystem and protecting vulnerable species from extinction. Also, an important factor was the presence of dangerous wildlife that posed a threat to the peaceful people of Idaho. Earl realized that action needed to be taken to protect citizens and prevent potential conflicts with wildlife. He decided that his experience and skills could be effectively utilized to solve such problems and protect people from dangerous situations. So Earl was motivated not only by his principles and beliefs, but also by a desire to protect nature and society from possible threats. His work as a state game warden was not only a professional achievement for him, but also a way for him to make an important contribution to nature conservation and public safety. Together with his team, Earl has saved a great many lives of both peaceful people and animals. He always remained humble and steadfast in his commitment to making the world a better and safer place for all. His work has been an invaluable contribution to conservation and citizen safety, and his name has become a symbol of hope and protection. Over the years, Earl became a legend in his field. His stories and exploits became very well known around the world. One such story was the Black Bear mission. Earl went in search of a bear that had attacked and killed a child. However, things didn't go as planned, and the bear had his entire family, a female bear and her 4 cubs, by his side. It was a very dangerous assignment, but Earl was ready for any challenge. This time, Earl went on the mission alone. Since the rest of his team had enough other work to do, he devised a plan of action and began to watch the bears to determine the best time to act. After a few days of observation, he realized that the female bear and her cubs left to hunt at a certain time each day. It was at that time that he decided to act. Using special frostbitten meat, he attracted the bears to a certain spot where he was already waiting for them. Together with Earl, several of his 4-legged friends went out to hunt. They were the best helpers in the hunt, fast, agile, and incredibly loyal to their master. Among them were 2 huge retriever dogs, one of which was an old dog named Rocket, and 3 small but no less brave helpers. Each of the dogs had its own role in the hunt. Together with Earl and his faithful dogs, the hunt became a real adventure. They overcame difficulties, searched for game tracks, pursued it, and finally succeeded. This time, however, the bear smelled them first. Not paying attention to the meat, she swooped down on Earl, who had taken shelter on the trunk of a huge pine tree that had been felled by the wind. The dogs were rushing towards her, but this dangerous predator would deal with them quickly. She drove the dogs away and continued to follow the hunter. Earl realized that he would have to act quickly to save his life and the lives of his faithful companions. Besides, Earl didn't have much ammunition for his .44 Magnum. The bear climbed up without much trouble and walked straight up the trunk toward the hunter, shaking her head and baring her teeth. Earl aimed for the animal's throat and shouted to the dogs to grab the bear, but surprisingly they passed by without responding to their master's orders. The bear stood 20 pounds away from Earl with her attention focused on the hunter's throat, a Magnum .44. The caliber was not a particularly formidable weapon to subdue an enraged bear who wanted to keep her cubs alive at all costs and defend her domain. In a sense, Earl came to the gunfight with a knife. The hunter fired 2 shots that only tangentially grazed the animal. With only 8 rounds left, Earl realized that he could no longer use his shots so inefficiently as the hunter's life was at stake. Aiming for the throat of the enraged beast, Earl pulled the trigger, firing 1 shot after another. 1, 2, 3, 4. But these shots only made the bear even angrier, and she began to approach Earl slowly but surely. Not panicking, Earl continued to leave holes in the huge carcass. 5, 6, 7, 8, click. Earl was out of ammo, but the bear was still steady on her feet, and the hunter's mind flashed to the thought that it was over. However, Rocket, the dog who was more experienced than the others, came to Earl's aid and bravely rushed to the bear, sinking his teeth into the bear's side to save his master from imminent death. They both flew off the log, snapping their teeth and falling to the ground at this moment. Watching the actions of the leader, the other dogs also rushed into the fight. Earl reloaded and fired 10 more shots from his Ruger .22 caliber pistol. The bear retreated into the thicket, and the hunter and his dogs rushed after her. However, after following the bear's tracks, was found there dead from 2.22 caliber rounds hitting her vital organs. The bear had 14 holes in her. The cubs managed to escape, and the hunter, reporting the end of the operation, waited for his men to retrieve the body of the dead animal. This story once again proves that cold-bloodedness and help of one's comrades will help to overcome any difficulties upon returning from this dangerous mission. Earl continued his work for the rest of his life, trying to help all creatures that needed his help. His example inspired many people, and his name became a symbol of service and animal protection around the world. Sergei grew up in a family of hunters and always dreamed of becoming a real hunter. His father and grandfather taught him all the secrets of hunting, passing on their knowledge and experience. From childhood, Sergei went hunting with them, participated in preparing equipment and learning to shoot. When Sergei came of age, he decided to follow in his parents' footsteps and joined a hunting club. There he trained hard, improving his shooting skills and learning to understand the behavior of wild animals. With each new hunting season, Sergei became more experienced and confident. He took part in various hunting competitions and always achieved excellent results. His keen eye and marksmanship attracted the attention of other hunters, and he was respected for his professionalism and dedication to hunting. Sergei always valued his family's traditions and believed that hunting was not just a hobby, but a way of life. He knew that it was not only a way to relax and spend time in nature, but also a method of preserving the ecosystem and balance in nature. Taiga is a vast forested area that can be a very dangerous place due to the presence of predators such as bears. Bears, especially the brown bear, are some of the most dangerous predators in the taiga. They can be aggressive and attack humans when threatened or if they feel frightened or they spot food. An encounter with a bear in the taiga can be fatal. Bears are very powerful and can easily travel long distances in search of food. They can also be very cunning and skilled at hiding, making them hard to detect. Therefore, living in a place like the taiga requires caution and knowledge of basic safety precautions when encountering wild animals, including bears. Once, when Sergei was only 15 years old, he went hunting with his father and grandfather in the taiga. They were already in place and had set up camp when suddenly they heard a bear howl from far away. Sergei was frightened, but his father and grandfather calmed him down and told him to stay still and not to panic. The bear was approaching their camp, and they saw it scampering through the shrubbery. My father and grandfather had to act quickly. They took their rifles and shouted loudly to drive the bear away. Sergei also took his gun and was ready to help. But suddenly the bear stopped and started walking back into the forest. This incident with the bear remained in Sergei's memory forever. It was his first experience of meeting such a dangerous predator, and he realized how important it is to be careful and observant in the taiga. Since then, he became an even more responsible hunter and always remembered the danger that lurks in these savage places. His favorite hunt was for sable. It was the hunt for this beautiful and upright beast that required skill, dexterity, and good physical fitness. Every time he went sable hunting, Sergei felt excitement and delight, immersing himself in the world of nature and competing with the clever and cunning animal. He knew that successful sable hunting required perseverance, attention, and patience. And it was these qualities that he developed and honed as he became an increasingly experienced hunter. But he didn't know that's what would happen to him. It was an autumn day as Sergei was going sable hunting. He went out into the woods, taking his trusty rifle and equipment with him. He knew that sable hunting requires special care and dexterity because these animals are very fast and cautious. Sergei spent several hours in the forest, following the beast and hiding behind trees. He felt adrenaline and excitement from the upcoming hunt. Suddenly, he heard a rustle in the bushes behind him. He cautiously turned around and saw a sable. Sergei took aim and fired. His shot was accurate and the sable fell to the ground. Sergei walked over to it, making sure that the animal was dead. He felt satisfaction from a successful hunt and gratitude to nature for this moment. After collecting his prey, Sergei headed back to the camp. When he returned to the hut, he heard strange sounds. He quickly looked around and found that a bear had crept up on him, apparently interested in the smell of his prey. Sergei was terrified and realized that he would have to fight for his life. He drew his rifle and tried to scare the bear away, but the beast was too close. The bear struck Sergei, injuring his leg. He fell and blood trickled on the ground. Sergei was in sharp pain, but he didn't give up. Gathering his remaining strength, he was able to aim and shoot at the attacking bear. The beast howled in pain and retreated, allowing Sergei to get to his feet and crawl into the hut. His injuries turned out to be serious. He could not even stand on his feet, and all around was taiga and snow. We were lucky only with the weather. It was about -3, 6 degrees in the daytime, which is quite warm for these places. This is the land of loggers, hunters, and shift workers. Life here is harsh and nature has never been friendly. Having assessed his chances, Sergei realized that there was only one way out: to crawl. A few kilometers away was the hut of his friend, so he went there, but unfortunately he found no one there and left a note. Sergei had to wait for help for almost 3 weeks. His friend Sonia returned to the hut only on November 19th. He read the note and immediately called for help. The very next day, rescuers and police came for him and took him to the district center where he received medical care. His bear bite wound on his leg became infected due to lack of medical care and antiseptic agents. The skin around the wound became covered with purulent discharge, redness, and swelling. Sergei experienced severe pain and fever due to the infection. He also became thin due to lack of food and water. His face became pale and his eyes dull. His clothes were stained with blood and dirt, and his hair was braided and badly tangled. When Sergei was finally located and taken to the city, his condition was stabilized after receiving medical attention. He was prescribed antibiotics and wound care to prevent infection and save his leg. He also received nutritional injections and fluids to regain strength and weight gain. As Sergei recovered, his face began to regain color and his eyes became bright again. He began walking on crutches, gradually regaining muscle mass and strength. Sergei's relatives were not looking for him. In Siberia, hunters can live in the taiga for a month or even more. Naturally, communication in the forest is also far from being available everywhere. They thought that he continued hunting because he was an experienced hunter. But wild nature sometimes brings surprises that you don't expect at all.